Our salvation as a people, as a culture, depends on salving the wounds of this war. A war of images within the American Family Album.
Inspired by Deborah Willis's groundbreaking book, Reflections in Black, director Thomas Allen has crafted the documentary Through a Lens Darkly that stresses the importance of African Americans taking charge and capturing and telling their own stories through photographs. The filmmaker stopped by our studio.
Deborah Willis approached me about 10 years ago about doing a filmic interpretation of her book.
Okay.
And so it took about 10 years. And the book is really a kind of encyclopedia of Black photography and Black photographers. And so it was really difficult to try to figure out, well, how do we turn this into a film? How do we create a narrative that allows people to understand why it's so important to look at Black photographers? And so we had to look at the images that Black people were encountering during the last 170 years, in popular culture. Mm-hmm. And so it took that much time both to uncover those images, but also uncover the images of Black photographers, because Black photographers had the images of Black families.
Well, you mentioned families. Now, you started the documentary with your own family album of photographs and whatnot. How important do you feel the family album is to a family, and what does it represent?
Well, I think particularly for African Americans, because of segregation, our families have never been seen, widely within popular culture. Maybe within the Black press, in terms of Black newspapers. Those are the people that were hiring Black photographers. But they've never been archived and valued, so they're not collected, until very recently in the work of Deborah Willis and a whole bunch of people, of that generation. And so a lot of the images of Black photographers and images of Black families, in terms of our evolution in this country, are in our families, in our homes.
That's true.
They're not in museums. They're not, not in galleries. And so they're not in books, with the exception of Deborah Willis's books and a few other books. Part of what I wanted to do with this film is show us how important it was to look at the things we value, or look at the Black photographs as something of value, and not wait until they disappear because of a flood or a fire and realize, oh my gosh, I can't replace these things.
A few photographers that some people do know of, like James Van Der Zee and Gordon Parks, but there are so many, and what do you think is the power that they were able to capture by being those type of photographers and capturing our history?
Yeah, well, Black photography goes back to the beginning of photography, 1840s, with Jules Leon in New Orleans, and although very few of his images survive, what they captured were images of Black people making ourselves. Despite the fact that, we are maybe one or two generations from slavery, those people who were free were able to, take up the camera or go to a photographic studio and ask or, pay for someone to take a picture of them. A lot of these early Black photographers were also abolitionists. So they were, not only artists, but they were activists. And from the very beginning of photography, because it was started 20 years before the Emancipation Proclamation, it was used by both the abolitionists on one hand, but also by slave owners to try to prove that African Americans are not human. So they would take pictures of African Americans without clothes.
Right.
And, this is during the Victorian era. So they were like, trying to shame us, basically.
Right.
And so with each decade from then, from the invention of photography, African Americans have been using photography as a tool to affirm our humanity.
Well, it's very powerful. There are a number of images in there that are hard to look at. Some of the lynchings and things like that. And through this process, I'm curious for you, how cathartic was this for you to see our history depicted this way in ways that we've really never seen? We don't learn about this in school. We don't see these images.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's to live with those images, the archives, both the the images of us as, kind of loving parents, sons, daughters, brothers and sisters, business owners, workers, and to have these other images of, where, the bodies are just torn apart. I felt like it was really important to, as many people in the film say, to look at both of these to kind of understand, you know, who we were. And my stepdad is from South Africa, and I made a film, 12 Disciples of Nelson Mandela, before this film. It was one of my films. And so I was very much aware of the truth and reconciliation that happened in South Africa after apartheid. You know, in this country, we haven't really had that.
No.
You know, we haven't had a reconciling of the legacy of slavery, you know, on a national level. You know, maybe as us as black folks early on, we had, you know, Emancipation Day and, or Juneteenth. But, you know, in terms of the society, you know, that we haven't really had that. And for me, this film, in some ways, hopefully opens up that dialogue and talks about the legacy that's still with us today.
Well, you speak of legacy. One of the things that stood out to me is how Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass were actually able to use photography and their images to put forward their political agenda and whatnot. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, I mean, photography back then in the 1850s was very much like the internet is today. You know, it's like, wow, it's something that's new, it's a tool. As Frederick Douglass said, you know, before photography came around, the only people who were able to get pictures of themselves were people who could afford to hire a painter.
Right.
You know, so they were the royalty, the elite, and photography democratized that whole process. So someone who's able to, scrape together some coins were able to go into a studio and say, take my picture. Today is the day that, I'm sending my grandson off to, let's say, school in the north. Or, my granddaughter is like just learning how to read. Take our picture. We're humble, we're putting on the best clothes we can, but this is how we want to be seen, and so that's really affirming, and you really feel it,
Well, I have to say, I think with social media now, we're all image makers. It's you. Thank you for being here. I think it's a great documentary. I think it's something that everybody should see, and we'll be back. When we return,
I've lived every day and night as if it was my last.
Kevin Kline plays the original Hollywood bad boy, Errol Flynn, in The Last of Robin Hood, next on Arise on Screen.
I've been in this business for many, many years, more than I really like to admit, but the truth is I have never worked with a more capable group of people than the team here at Arise News. These are people that have been in this business for a long time and have covered a wide array of news. There's nothing almost that this team hasn't experienced. So the depth of experience, the depth of history here is just absolutely amazing. And here's the cool thing, it's a fun place to work. They're nice people too.
Well, Arise is the only network that really covers comprehensively the African diaspora. It gives people in other parts of the world of color a chance to know about people here in the United States, us to know about them, and the world to know about us. So it's kind of an educational experience for everybody involved. Getting to know people through stories, through personal stories. You really get a chance to know what people are actually all about, what communities are about. How are we different? But more importantly, what commonalities we all share.
There's certain news programs that have a Democrat and a Republican, and all they do is, here's the Democrat saying his side, and the Republican say, it's a little debate show, but not everybody is a sort of an extremist on one side or the other. People are in the middle a lot more.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Every day we're basically told you ain't it, you don't look right.
The cowards.
Shiftless.
Laziness.
Stupid.
Seemingly never-ending barrage of negative representations wield a certain kind of political force, even though they are fictions.
So I have to say, I found this a very moving documentary, something that made me think further and further. And we're back, just in case you have just tuned in. This is Arise on Screen. I'm here with Ziba Blay from ShadowNack.com and Bobby Rivers, who needs no introduction. But I'm going to start with you, Ziba. Now, how could you relate to this documentary? I mean, you were mentioning earlier that you are kind of the archivist in your family. But what did this make you think about in terms of the power of us controlling our images?
Well, I think now more than ever, this is a really timely documentary when we think of Mike Brown and the way images of him have been shared. The juxtaposition of the image of him lying on the ground, pictures of him throwing up gang signs as opposed to a picture of him with his cap and gown.
Just graduated.
How do these images reflect who we are? And I mean, the documentary for me, it was powerful because it really brings home the point that we need to be able to control how we are reflected to the wider world.
Well, you know, it's interesting. One of the things that really struck me in this documentary was how all those photos that the wife photographers took were posed, setting us up in a certain way, versus us being, you know, just living our lives.
Just living our lives. And I also thought about Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin. And when I got interested in photography, when I was a kid, I lived in the curfew area during the Watts riots of the 60s. And the images that we saw on TV of the black community wasn't totally accurate of like my parents and other people on our block. And it made me think about Hollywood images, you know, like the restricted career of Hattie McDaniel, the complicated career of the actor known as Stepin Fetchit. And in realistic images like that, it moved me. This documentary is a must-see. It made me cry. It really made me cry.
I agree. And you know, it's interesting too, seeing the Sojourner Truth and the Frederick Douglass is, we've all seen, of any black photo we've ever seen, we've all seen that photo of Frederick Douglass.
We have.
And the fact that he took it, and you know, all these years later, that's what we have to record that this man lived and did what he did.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that that's very powerful. It says the lasting power of an image.
Yes.
So we're going to move on. Our final film is The Last of Robin Hood, about famed Hollywood playboy and movie star Errol Flynn in his final years. The movie chronicles his love affair with an underage actress and stars Kevin Kline, doing great as Errol Flynn, Dakota Fanning as a young actress, and Susan Sarandon as the celebrity-obsessed stage mom.
Errol Flynn. They don't make him like that anymore.
He's a rascal, that one.
There's a certain someone very much like to meet you.
Who?
Errol Flynn. You know who he is, don't you?
Sure, Robin Hood.
Now, I enjoyed this film quite a bit, actually. I thought Kevin Kline was great in the movie, and I thought he was like perfectly cast as Errol Flynn. Susan Sarandon, I thought she was terrific, but to me, it wasn't even a stretch for her. She could do this in her sleep. It's interesting. You made a very interesting point, Ziba, about Dakota Fanning without the veneer of the ingenue, that you found her somewhat flat, and I was surprised at how flat she was in this movie. But Bobby, you liked this movie, I think, a lot more than Ziba did.
I did. I thought it was a good movie. Bad title. I thought Kevin Kline was at his best, and I like Kevin Kline, but sometimes I catch him acting. There's too much technique. Sarandon, I thought, man, she really nailed it. She really nailed it.
She knows this guy.
She's sort of, she wants the daughter to be a celebrity more than the daughter wants to be a celebrity. And in today's terms, I think it works because we're in the Bronze Age of the Kardashians. You know, people can become a celebrity for merely walking upright. And she doesn't care about that. The daughter wants to be an honorable person.
Yes, she does. Now, Ziba, you felt that this was more like a TV movie.
Yeah.
And you weren't impressed too much with anything in it except Kevin Kline.
Yeah, Kevin Kline, I agree. He's a perfect casting as Errol Flynn, and this is an interesting time for him to be playing the character. But I thought it was too safe. I thought I thought it was too safe. I thought you have this really interesting material, this really interesting time in this actor's life that not a lot of us know about, and you choose to frame it as this kind of like love story, which is interesting, but there's so many other levels to the love story that I feel like were not completely explored. Dakota was a very one-note character. Susan Sarandon, as great as she was, very one-note character, you know, and I wish there had been a bit more nuance to what was going on there.
Well, I think it's worth seeing. I will say there was nothing very stylistic about the
art house film.
About what's that?
Good art house film.
Good art house film.
Yeah.
I'd say it was a good art house film. A little better than a TV movie, but I think it was definitely an indie spirit art house film. So, well, it's been a lot of fun, and for those of you at home, if you've got family photos that you'd like to share with us, you can visit us on our Facebook at Arise on Screen, or tweet us at Arise on Screen. This is Mike Sargent, and next week we'll be back, and it's been a lot of fun with you too. I hope you'll come back, Ziba. And we'll be back to talk more movies here on Arise on Screen.